In June of 1975, the city of Savannah, Georgia, was wrapped in celebration. The air was thick with summer heat, and Elizabeth Carter, just 23 years old, had just married the love of her life. Her wedding photos captured a woman glowing with joy, twirling barefoot beneath Spanish moss, laughing in her ivory gown. But by sunrise, the celebration turned to horror. Elizabeth was gone. Her new husband awoke alone in their honeymoon suite. The bed was untouched. Her shoes were by the door. On the floor near the window, a single smear of blood. For decades, the case haunted Savannah. No suspects, no evidence, no trace of Elizabeth. Theories ranged from a runaway bride to abduction to a lover's quarrel gone wrong, but nothing stuck. The case was quietly shelved and other ghosts buried in the archives of unsolved crime. Until 2005, inside a temperature-controlled evidence room, her wedding dress still hung, sealed since the night she vanished. Forensics experts, using cutting-edge genetic genealogy, discovered something previous generations never could: DNA embedded in the lace. A partial male profile, degraded but intact enough to be matched. The name that surfaced had never been mentioned in the original investigation. Walter Granger. It's a long-haul trucker with no known connection to Elizabeth. He died in 1994, buried without suspicion. But after matching distant relatives in a public genealogy database, the trail led to him, and it didn't stop there. Cold cases from Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi suddenly lit up with new connections. 3 women, 3 disappearances, all young. All found near remote truck stops. And now, Elizabeth Carter would be the 4th. The revelation sent shockwaves through Granger's surviving family. A niece came forward in disbelief, recalling odd behavior, cryptic comments from childhood. Others were less willing to talk, but the facts were undeniable. Walter Granger had lived a double life. Beneath the surface of an ordinary existence was a pattern of horrific violence. For Elizabeth's family, it was the answer they'd waited half a century to hear. There would be no trial, no apology, no cell door clanging shut. But there was truth. At last, in a quiet corner of Savannah, her remaining siblings gathered at a memorial site, placing fresh flowers under her wedding photos. This time, not in mourning, but in peace. And just as one secret came to light, another waited beneath the waves. Daniel Vaughn had everything. A billion-dollar tech empire, a sprawling estate on the Florida coast, a perfectly curated online persona. He was the poster child for the American dream. Handsome, brilliant, philanthropic. But behind the magazine covers and corporate speeches was a man who knew how to keep secrets. Deadly ones. On a cool October morning in 2023, Daniel was found dead on his private yacht, drifting 5 miles off the coast of Naples. The yacht's GPS showed erratic movement before shutting off entirely. The official report? Accidental death. He'd slipped and hit his head while sailing alone. No foul play suspected. Case closed in less than 72 hours. But the public wasn't buying it. For one, his estranged wife, Melanie Vaughn, had mysteriously disappeared just 3 months earlier. No press conference. No search parties. Her social media accounts were wiped clean, and her last known location was ironically Daniel's yacht. Police said she likely fled the country. Friends whispered that she had been planning to leave him. Others believed she was dead. In January 2025, a stunning leak reignited the story. An anonymous source sent a USB drive to the Coastline Herald, a small investigative outlet. Inside were encrypted files, internal police memos, photographs, and something chilling, a letter. It was a suicide note, dated 3 days after Melanie's disappearance. The ink had smudges, as if water had spilled on it. At the bottom was Melanie's signature, so it appeared. The letter read like a confession. Guilt over infidelity, emotional instability, a goodbye to a husband who had given her everything. But experts quickly pointed out irregularities. The grammar didn't match her past writing. The signature looked forced. And then came the final blow when forensic handwriting analysts confirmed the letter was a forgery. Then came the deleted texts. Buried in Vaughn's recovered phone data log, thought to be wiped, were chilling messages to an unknown burner number. "She's starting to talk. Make it look like she vanished. You'll get the rest after it's clean." It was no longer a theory. Daniel Vaughn had orchestrated his wife's murder, and with enough money and influence, he buried the truth beneath a web of silence. Investigators began digging deeper. Former employees stepped forward, whistleblowers who had been paid to disappear or stay quiet. A former housekeeper recalled a heated argument just days before Melanie vanished. One of Daniel's private security men, after being granted immunity, admitted to driving someone else's boat that night, someone who never came back. Then, the ultimate twist. Melanie's journal, hidden behind a wall panel in her old art studio, was discovered by her younger sister. Inside were entries that painted a portrait of fear and surveillance. She wrote of hidden cameras, of being drugged, of waking up in unfamiliar rooms. She knew she was being watched. She feared she would be erased. Her final entry was dated just one day before her disappearance. 7 haunting words written in all caps. "If I die, he did I." The case is now officially reopened. A grand jury is reviewing the evidence, and 2 former officers who handled the original investigation are under internal review. What was once seen as a tragic accident is now being investigated as a carefully orchestrated murder, one that nearly vanished into thin air. As more details emerge, the public is demanding answers. Who helped Daniel Vaughn cover up a killing? How deep does the corruption run? And if someone can pay to bury the truth, how many others have? But justice, once awakened, does not sleep again. And in 2025, it was a voice from the shadows, not money, not power, that finally turned the tide in another case. Because sometimes, the killer calls you directly. It started with a missing hiker. A quiet story from 2018 that barely made the evening news, one of thousands of unsolved disappearances that faded into the background of a noisy world. But Lena Reyes didn't forget. She was 32 years old, a former crime reporter turned independent podcaster. And she had a simple rule: no one disappears without someone noticing. Someone always notices. And she had noticed this one. His name was Mark Candler, an environmental science grad student who loved rock climbing, herbal teas, and mountain air. On a solo trip through Colorado's San Juan Mountains, Mark vanished without a trace. No gear recovered, and no signs of struggle. Just a single voicemail left on his mother's phone. Timestamped at 2:14 a.m., it was only 3 words, whispered, "Urgent." "He found me." Authorities dismissed it, said the cold and altitude made people hallucinate, that Mark had probably wandered off a trail and succumbed to exposure. Case closed. No foul play suspected. But Lena thought otherwise. By 2025, Lena's podcast, Dark Truths, Unresolved, had exploded in popularity. Each season, she reinvestigated one cold case, often uncovering details that had been overlooked or deliberately ignored. With a loyal following and access to experts, she dove into the Candler case. And what she uncovered chilled even the most seasoned listeners. A series of similar disappearances in the region dating back to 2009. All young men, all hikers, all alone. A series of similar disappearances in the region dating back to 2009. All young men, all hikers, all alone. Every case marked by the same eerie pattern. No remains, no calls for help. And always within a 30-mile radius of a town called Arlen Ridge. A town that didn't appear on any modern maps. Lena made the trip herself, documenting every step. Locals were tight-lipped, some refused to speak at all. Lena made the trip herself, documenting every step. Locals were tight-lipped. Some refused to speak at all. One elderly gas station owner finally agreed to talk, but only off camera. And only after making Lena promise not to use his name. He told her there were places you simply don't go after dark. Old ranger trails that had been shut down for renovation but never reopened. He mentioned a man, or what was left of one. But a hermit, people said. Or a hunter, or worse. Lena was skeptical until she found the bones. just beyond a collapsed ranger station marked as inactive since 1987, buried in a shallow grave were human remains. She called the authorities immediately. When DNA results came back, they confirmed what Lena feared. It was Mark Candler. Her episode documenting the discovery went viral overnight. Millions tuned in. News networks scrambled for interviews. But nothing, not the ratings, not the applause, could have prepared her for what came next. On a rainy Thursday morning, during a live Q&A with listeners, the call came through. A man, low voice, untraceable number. "Stop looking," he said. Lena's heart froze. The voice was calm, controlled. He said Mark had trespassed, that he'd found something that wasn't meant to be found. And then, just before Lena's producer could cut the line, "I didn't mean to kill him, but I did." Then silence. The call lasted 47 seconds. The FBI traced the signal to an abandoned motel near the state line. By the time agents arrived, the room was empty, but inside, on the bathroom mirror, written in condensation, were 2 words: "I'm next." What followed was a frenzy. The confession was authentic, confirmed by details not released to the public. Within days, another call came. "It's time to 911. Same voice, same calm tone. He turned himself in at a rest stop hours later, 400 miles away. A drifter named Calvin Rowe, aged 48, with a long criminal history and a past no one had cared to investigate, told agents everything. Where the other victims were buried, how he stalked them, why he targeted men who thought they were untouchable, and how he'd watched Lena from a distance for months, debating whether she, too, should vanish. He said the podcast saved her. As authorities unearthed 3 more graves in the region, Lena's work was praised by law enforcement across the country. As authorities unearthed 3 more graves in the region, Lena's work was praised by law enforcement across the country. But the victory was hollow. Because as she listened back to the recorded confession, one part stuck out. "I didn't kill the first one. It meant someone else started it. Someone Calvin knew. Someone still out there." Just like that, the case shattered wide open again. The FBI is now investigating a possible ring operating in the national forests of the Rockies. More disappearances are being reclassified. More evidence is emerging. And Lena, scarred but unshaken, has vowed to keep going. Because if one voice can confess, another can whisper the truth. And in next week's episode, we travel to a remote Utah community where dozens of women vanished over 2 decades, each linked to the same off-the-grid church. The place is real. The leader's name is sealed. But the survivors, they're finally ready to talk. There's a stretch of desert in southern Utah so isolated, maps simply label it undeveloped land. No cell towers, no lights. No reason to go unless you're running from something or someone. Locals call it Zion Hollow. It's not a town, it's not on the grid, but it's real. Dirt roads winding through canyons, clusters of trailers and modular homes scattered across miles of sagebrush. Yes, where a breakaway religious group settled decades ago, one that called itself the Pure Way. They preached discipline, obedience, and silence. And from 1997 to 2019, at least 27 women vanished from that desert. No headlines, no Amber Alerts. It's just a growing collection of empty chairs and unanswered prayers. In early 2025, a survivor came forward. Her name is Hope Walker, was raised in Zion Hollow. From the outside, she seemed like any other homeschooled girl, braided hair, modest dress, polite but distant. But inside, she was carrying a secret no child should bear. For years, Hope was told the world outside was evil, that disobedient girls were taken by God when they failed to serve their purpose, that silence was salvation. She believed it until she found a journal hidden behind a loose panel in her mother's trailer. The pages were fragile, yellowed by time. But what they revealed tore her world apart. The journal belonged to her sister, Joy, who had disappeared in 2012 at age 15. Authorities claimed she'd run away. Her name had been forgotten. But Joy never left Zion Hollow. She was buried there. Hope ran away just weeks after reading the journal. She hitchhiked across 2 states, lived in shelters, survived on church donations. And then she found Lena Reyes' podcast. Hope sent one message: they're still there. And the prophet knows everything. Lena went quiet for months after the candler confession, haunted by the weight of what she'd uncovered. Got Hope's email reawakened something in her. Within weeks, Lena was on a plane to Utah. She met Hope in a Denny's off I-15, eyes wide, fingers trembling, hands wrapped tight around a locket with her sister's picture inside. Hope spoke for 4 hours. She told Lena about the pure-blood rituals, the men who patrolled the perimeter at night, the underground room where girls were cleansed. She described hearing screams echoing through the canyon, then silence. Always silence. But the most chilling part? The names. Hope recited a list: 12 names, all girls who went missing over the span of 2 decades. Each one remembered only by the color of her hair or the shape of her eyes. None of them were ever reported missing, because in Zion Hollow, girls weren't allowed to exist outside the prophet's word. Lena and her producer drove out to the hollow at dawn. The air was still, the sky cloudless. They parked near the old schoolhouse, wooden boards nailed across the windows, the faint smell of something rotting in the wind. They walked the perimeter. No guards, no people, just relics of a life abandoned, till they reached the prayer pit. It was a shallow ravine behind the chapel. Locals claimed it was a place of fasting. But Lena's team found bones, small, unmarked, buried beneath burned fabric and handmade crosses. They called in federal authorities. Within weeks, the entire area was declared a crime scene. Forensics uncovered the remains of at least 9 individuals, 8 of them children or teens. The prophet, whose real name was Samuel Gentry, had fled the hollow 2 years earlier. But in 2025, he was finally arrested while living under a fake name in northern Arizona, running a small bookstore. He confessed to everything. Sort of. In interviews, Gentry claimed the girls had ascended, that they were chosen by God to shed their earthly skins. He admitted to ceremonial burials, but denied murder. When shown pictures of Joy Walker's journal, he smiled. She wrote, "Well," he said, "but she asked too many questions. The investigation is ongoing. More sites are being excavated. Survivors are slowly stepping forward, some who haven't spoken in decades." Lena is producing an entire season on Zion Hollow, focused solely on the survivors, their stories, and the culture of control that kept them silent for so long. But as horrifying as this case is, it may only be the beginning. Because buried deep within Gentry's confiscated journals were letters handwritten, correspondence between him and another figure, someone referred to only as Brother of the Mountain, a man whose beliefs, Gentry wrote, inspired the path. Coordinates listed in those letters point to a vast wooded area in northern Idaho, a compound, a community, and possibly more graves. As Lena prepares to travel there, she leaves her listeners with a warning. What we think is hidden is often standing in plain sight. Watch the woods. Listen to silence. Because someone, somewhere, is still building something worse. From the outside, the mountains of northern Idaho seem untouched, tendless pine forests stretching toward snow-capped peaks. Humming with wind and silence, it's a place where people go to disappear. Some for peace, others for power. In March 2025, federal investigators followed a trail of handwritten letters found in the home of cult leader Samuel Gentry into these woods. The letters were dated as far back as 2001, referencing something called the Second Covenant, and signed only by a name that didn't appear in any database. Brother of the Mountain. Most dismissed it as fanatical rambling. But one set of coordinates scribbled in the margin of a torn page led authorities to a dense patch of forest just outside Clearwater National Forest. No marked roads, no signage, just a narrow path beaten down by boots and silence. At the end of the trail, hidden behind a ridge of boulders and brush, was something terrifying in its simplicity. A gate. Homemade steel, reinforced, locked from the inside. No name, no welcome sign, no trespassing warnings. Just a watchtower with blacked-out windows and beyond it, the glint of rooftops, maybe a dozen buildings scattered through the trees, most made from salvaged wood and sheet metal. It was a compound, and it was active. Federal agents tried to make contact. No response. Drones were sent in and jammed midair. That's when the Department of Homeland Security got involved. With satellite imaging and infrared scans, they estimated as many as 40 people living inside. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Behind the largest structure was a field of flattened area marked by dozens of evenly spaced wooden posts. Attached to each was a piece of cloth, weather-worn, color-coded, and swaying eerily in the wind. Some looked like old dresses, others like children's blankets. No one knew what they represented. In April 2025, a woman escaped. She didn't have a name when they found her. A malnourished, barefoot, and terrified of every light. She called herself Rain. She said she had been born inside the compound. Said the people there weren't allowed to speak real names. Said the man who ran it, brother of the mountain, controlled everything, including memory. Rain said no one was allowed to ask where the others had gone. The interviews were classified for weeks. But then, Lena Reyes got a call from a nurse working at the recovery center. Rain had drawn a map, showed the compound. The sleeping quarters, the mess hall, the punishment house, and at the very edge of the drawing, just beneath the trees, was something scribbled in red ink. The cage. Rain said the cage was where the chosen were sent to wait for fire. That was all she would say. Lena traveled to Idaho days later. This time, with a federal permit, an armed team, and 2 trauma psychologists. Rain agreed to walk them to the outer gate. She refused to go farther. As they approached the compound, it was empty. No guards, no gunfire, no people. The buildings had been burned to the ground, still smoking. Signs of recent activity were everywhere. Food, bedding, fresh footprints, but no bodies. No sign of forced evacuation. It was as if the entire community had vanished overnight, except one. Near the tree line, about 300 feet from the compound, search dogs uncovered a buried root cellar. The hatch was bolted shut from the outside. Inside was a steel cage, 10 by 10 feet, the walls covered in claw marks. Dried blood in every corner, a recording device embedded in the ceiling. Audio logs stretched back months, screams, prayers, children asking to go home. A man's voice chanting verses in a language no one has yet identified. And then, at the end of the final tape, a whisper. She found us. Lena's name was never spoken, but there was no doubt. Federal records show a communications blackout had been imposed the week before the team arrived. Whoever lived in that compound had time to destroy, flee, or worse, rebuild somewhere new. And now, new letters are surfacing, mailed anonymously to journalists. All in the same handwriting, all with coordinates. One led to a storm drain in rural Montana, where a child's dress was found wrapped around a sealed jar. Inside the jar, photo. 3 children standing in a dark room holding signs with numbers. No names, no dates. One of the children matches Rain's description, only younger. And carved into the wall behind them were 4 chilling words. Only one gets out. This story is far from over. As of late 2025, multiple compounds are being investigated across Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. A digital trail has emerged: old message boards, encrypted forums, fragments of a manifesto titled The Cleansing Doctrine, and somewhere out there, the man known as Brother of the Mountain is still alive, still watching. And the final letter Lena received just days ago came with a single line written in blood-red ink. Come alone, we'll be waiting. The wind is colder now in the mountains. The compound is gone, the cage is empty. But the echoes linger. In the months since the discovery in Idaho, federal investigators have unearthed 6 more sites across the western United States. Some were tiny, just a trailer, a shack, a fire pit. Others had entire underground chambers, false walls, evidence of years of planning. What they all had in common was silence. Silence enforced by fear, by belief, by pain. And through it all, Lena Reyes kept following the trail. She's no longer just a podcaster. She's become something else. A voice for the forgotten. A name whispered in places where no one was ever supposed to listen. Her work has led to the rescue of 5 more individuals, each one scarred, each one slowly returning to a world they were taught to fear. But one question still remains unanswered. Who is Brother of the Mountain? No official photograph exists. The sketches based on Rain's description are vague, haunting, but not definitive. DNA found in the cage matches no known identity. He's a phantom hiding behind faith and fear, shifting locations, changing names. Some believe he's dead. Others believe he never existed at all, just a ghost, a myth. A monster people follow because they need someone to fear. But Lena doesn't believe in ghosts. She believes in evidence, patterns, and the quiet things people overlook. Her latest episode ends not with a scream, not with a whisper, but with a sound pulled from one of the cage recordings. A faint knock, repeating deliberate. Code, a message. And now, audio analysts are decoding it. The sound may point to one final location. A last chapter still waiting to be written. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something even bigger. Because if there's one truth this entire investigation has revealed, it's this. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it wears a smile, sometimes it wears a badge, sometimes it hands you a Bible, and sometimes it's the voice telling you to look the other way. So what happens next? We follow the silence. We find the voices still waiting to be heard. We tell their stories, and we never stop. Because silence protects monsters, but stories set people free. If this series moved you, shocked you, or made you look at the world a little differently, then please, don't let the silence win. Like this video, comment your thoughts below, and tell us which part stayed with you the most. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Because the truth is still out there. Together we're going to find it. Till next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never stop asking what really happened.